Over here, guys. Got the sound. Got the sound. Thank you. Hey, everybody, it's Tony Robbins. Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. I thought, with all the people out there sending out their Christmas cards, maybe we do it this year in a digital form and save a few trees. So I just wanted to take a minute and first of all, thank you all for responding to my blog. I was overwhelmed by the number of people that responded personally. We had thousands in the first couple of days. And I spent my time reading them all. As you can imagine, since I'm fairly busy like you are, we've got 12 companies and my kids and my wife and everything I'm doing. I'm here at Date with Destiny to rock and roll a couple thousand people from 80 different countries. It's a full-time job by itself, but I really wanted to send out something during this time of challenge, this time of crisis that hopefully would just be a little trigger for you that would be valuable. And gosh, I was overwhelmed. I cried through some of your notes and your stories. I was touched by them. I was inspired by those of you who've stepped up in different ways and tried to get back to a bunch of you, as many of you I could in the time I had. I literally did it between midnight and 4 a.m. one night and about 1 a.m. and 5 a.m. another night, just so I could connect with you. So I love this. This way to communicate through the internet is fantastic. I'm going to continue to find ways to do it. But I wanted to send you one more video clip, even though I'm here at Date with Destiny getting started, just one little Christmas trigger to remind you that in these times of crisis, no matter what it is we face, you're bigger than the moment. You're bigger than the challenge. We've all faced crisis before, or crises, many of them in our lives. And sometimes it's really useful to just remember that you've faced it before. Maybe you haven't faced it in the financial realm. Maybe you faced it with your physical health. Or maybe you've not faced it so much in your job, but maybe you faced it really in an area like a relationship where it was a real crisis, or maybe it was a job situation. But whatever you faced before, you faced it, you found a way to conquer it. I know you can again, but also during these holidays, I want to make sure that you remind yourself that you can truly be happy. You don't have to wait to be happy till all your problems are gone. So I've got a little video clip here for you that I hope you'll enjoy. And I'm going to talk with my team after this holiday season. I'm going to get together with them and see if there's a way we could do more of this as an ongoing process, because some of you said you'd love to have this regularly. Maybe something we did 3 times a month with a little bit longer chunk with some specific tools in there as well as some of the philosophy, and maybe a new version of Power Talk. I don't know. I'll figure it out. But drop me a little note on my blog and tell me if you have an interest in some kind of subscription service like that, and we'll see what we can create that can really meet your needs on an ongoing basis in a really inexpensive way, but in a way where we could put focus into it regularly. But regardless, I just wanted to send you one more little kind of snippet as a gift. I hope it touches you, inspires you like you've touched and inspired me, and I hope that you and your family will take time to be grateful for the things that are everlasting in your life. Your love, your relationship, your friends, our health, our opportunity to learn and to grow and to expand and to become more and to give more, because this is the season of giving. So thanks again for responding. If you drop me a note on the blog, I'll be sure to read it, and I'll be able to touch base with some of you, obviously not all of you. And I hope you have a magnificent new year as well, and we'll see you soon. So here's a message. Take good care, and God bless. Live strong and live with passion. So while states are available to us, how fast can we change our states, my friends? How fast? In a heartbeat. In addition, though, there's a blueprint. I'd like to introduce you to your blueprint, at least the beginnings of it. So when our brain's trying to make a decision about what to do, interestingly enough, we have a set of beliefs, a set of values, a set of rules that affect whether or not we feel pain or pleasure in this moment. And that set of rules, if you will, that experience that I'm describing to you here, you can look at it in a certain way. You could say, since I can't control the events, I can't control what it what? We get control what things mean. We get to decide if it's the end or the beginning. Now, you can give up that control and let the environment condition you, and then you get to live whatever the environment gives you. Or you can take back control. Nelson Mandela, first time I ever met him, I'll never forget. It was such a privilege to meet him, and I was talking to him, and the first question I asked him was, I said, sir, I have to ask you, how did you survive 27 years in prison, having people take away your life? And he was a very big man, by the way. He's not a small guy. He's a tall man. And he kind of rose up, and he had this horrible look on his face, and I thought, I must have said the wrong thing. And he looked at me and said, I didn't survive. I prepared. And I thought, wow. I said, what do you mean, sir? And he said, I knew that I would either one of two things would happen. I would die in prison, and if I did, it would start a rebellion and my country would go through change. Or I would survive and I'd need to thrive. I'd need to be prepared because I'd eventually get out. And if I got out, I'd have the position to be able to lead my country. So while he was in prison, he studied Afrikaans so that he could speak in the native language. So instead of being a black man speaking in his language, in his tongues, he could speak in the white man's tongue. He prepared, he read, he did everything he could possibly do. See, he didn't suffer for 27 years. He did not suffer. The only way you suffer is by having a perceptual strategy that creates that. In fact, many of you came here because there's some pain in your life you want to get rid of. How many got some pain in some of your life where it's not how you want it to be? Say I. But if we get rid of your problem, that pain will just show up somewhere else. See, most people think, okay, the way out of pleasure, out of pain into pleasure is solve my problems. But how many of you in this room have some problems in your life? Maybe you don't like using that word. Maybe you prefer challenges. How many of you have some problems in your life right now? Raise your hand. Say I. How many of you came here to solve some of those problems? Say I. We're not going to do that. Well, we could solve your problem, but if we solve your problem, it'll just replace itself. What happens when you get a problem? You got several choices. The problem shows up, and what are your choices? One choice is to ignore it. How well does that work in terms of solving problems? Do problems go away when you ignore them, yes or no? Come on, guys, yes or no? No. What happens? They usually magnify, don't they? So we can't ignore it, so what's our second choice? If you don't ignore it, what do? Blame somebody. Isn't it true? Right? We don't want to see there's something wrong with us. Must be my mother or father. Must be my husband. Must be my kids. Must be. And eventually, most people blame themselves, even if they don't admit it. But blaming somebody doesn't solve a problem. So eventually, what do? Ignoring doesn't work. Blaming others, blaming ourselves doesn't work. So eventually, we usually, if we're smart, we come up with a what? What do we come up with? Come on, tell me. A solution. Now, what's interesting is when you come up with a solution, you got a way to solve the problem. A solution's an understanding, an idea, a strategy, a tool. It's something cognitive, usually. A solution has no value until you use it, right? So when you take a solution and you implement it, in order to implement a solution, you have to make a what in your life? A what? A change. Exactly, change. In my country, we call it change. You make a change. Now, when you make this change, can anybody tell me what happens the minute you make this change? Anybody know? The minute you make a change, it creates a new what? Who knows? Problem. You say, no. I come up with good solutions. I make good changes. Okay, let me give you a business example because it's not emotional. How many of you like Apple Computer, iPods, iTunes, things like that? Make some noise. Great. Apple had a problem. They were going out of business not that many years ago. So they came up with a solution. And the solution was to bring back the founder, Steve Jobs. And Steve Jobs came in and made a bunch of what? Changes. One of the changes he made was really simple. The first thing he did when he came back to Apple Computer, in fact, I noticed this because I have a friend who has an 82-year-old grandmother, and his 82-year-old grandmother, this is whatever, 15 years, 12 years, whatever it's been, I've forgotten now, but when he first took over, she said to my friend, I want a computer. In her 80s, never had a computer, never wanted a computer, ever, never even spoke of a computer. And he said, Grandma, you want a computer? She said, what kind? She said, a pink one. The first thing he did was he said, I'm not even going to do anything else. I'm just going to change the color and shape and make it feel different so people want them, have a different feeling associated to it. And you know what? That change created a bunch of problems because they had a bunch of other product that they hadn't sold yet. Because you had to go out and find other manufacturers because nobody was making color computers. Everything was gray or white. There were very few even black ones then. Almost everything was kind of gray, if you remember. Hard to remember, that's how it was. So we had a hard time getting it. All kinds of problems. They came up with solutions, they made changes, created a new problem, solution changed. And after a while, those solutions made a change where Apple Computer started selling a ton of these computers. By the way, did that change create a new problem? It was a quality problem, but it was a new problem. Guess what the new problem was? They didn't have enough of those computers. They didn't make enough of them. So that was a problem. So they came up with a solution. They expanded their capacity. They made a change. And guess what happened?
Created another problem. They had too much. They overdid it this time. Now, after a while, those computers didn't give the company enough boost to stay going to really solve the problem. So Steve Jobs came along and said, we got a problem. The problem is computers themselves have a low margin, and that's the business we're in. We need to be in a different business. We need to be in the music business. So he came up with a solution. He said, we're going to sell product, but what we're going to have is we're going to get in the software business as well. And we're going to make money on that software business. We're going to make sure that people can get their music online in a quality way without stealing. And he created iTunes. And he created the iPod. Now, there was a problem. The problem was it was big and thick and expensive, and he worked on solutions. They made changes, created new problems, until they worked out an iPod that really worked. Then the iPod became the dominant product in the marketplace. So dominant that they had a new problem. iPods are 85% of the digital music market. 85%. Now that's a problem, but it's a quality problem. How do you get more than 85% of the market in the whole world? How do you grow when you got 85%? So he came up with a solution. We'll create a little tiny iPod that's really tiny. This little mini iPod thing, whatever it was called. I can't remember what it was called. Anybody remember? Well, before the Shuffle, they made one. Remember the first one they made? Nano. The iPod Nano. And they did, look, we'll make this little sucker so small, it'll be so sexy, and people want one of these too, so we can sell the same people another iPod, and this is one they can stick in their pocket. This is one they can stick on their ear, for God's sakes. This is easy. And sure enough, they came up with a solution. And does anybody remember what happened? They changed it. Same problem showed up again. They couldn't keep them in stock. People were pissed off. They didn't have enough for Christmas. Right after Christmas, they built up, and they sped up the production. New solution, new changes. They had a new problem. They got sued, a class action lawsuit, because in order to speed up the process, they made a thinner cover, and the thinner cover scratched real easily. So a few lawyers got together with a few customers and did a class action lawsuit for $1.2 billion, saying they were charging too much money for this because they put a lousy cover that scratched too easily, and their solution was put a plastic cover on and it cost you $10. So they had lawsuits, but they were also, it was a good quality problem. They're the most successful company in the history of the world in their category. And by the way, they've begun to solve that, make changes, and guess what they have now more of? Can I give you a little clue? Problems are here to stay. Aren't you glad you came to this positive seminar? So if you came here to solve your problems, I want to tell you what your real problem is. Your problem is you think your problem is your problem. I'll say that again. Your only problem is you think your problem is your problem. Another way of saying that is, your only problem is you think you're not supposed to have problems. Your only problem is you think you're not supposed to have problems. Because if you think you're not supposed to have problems, that gives you a meaning. I have problems, there's something wrong with my life. Oh my God, all this stress. By the way, what if you're good at solving problems and you're smart and you change rapidly? Does that mean you get more problems or less problems? More problems faster. If a company is growing really fast, do they get more problems faster or slower? Which one? The faster you go, the more you do, the more problems you have. The more people you know, the more problems you have. If you only care about 2 people, you're going to have a certain set of problems. Care about a dozen people, you always got problems. Is it true? Your only problem is you think you're not supposed to have problems. If you didn't have problems, you would have nothing that would stimulate you to grow. You'd have nothing that would make you have to go find those other parts of you again. They would have died. If you hadn't had this unbelievable frustration and problem, you never would have got back to your passion at the same depth. Or been the mom you're now capable of being. Or triggered your relationship to a new level. Problems are our gifts. If you can start realizing every problem is a gift and look for the gift, your whole life will change. Because you won't be trying to just solve problems. You'll solve them. That's what leaders do. They solve problems. But they know as soon as they solve it, it creates more. They realize it's not the problem. I'll give you an example. When I was 30 years old, I'll never forget this, I had the chance of meeting a man named Dr. Norman Vincent Peale. How many have heard of Dr. Peale? Dr. Peale was the original Power of Positive Thinking author. And he was a Christian minister who had this whole approach called positive thinking. He's the one that popularized it in the early 20s. I met him when I was 30, and he was 92 years old, right? I think I was actually 32, and he was 92. And I remember he invited me to come to this seminar in New York City to meet him because my career was kind of just going. And I went backstage, and I met him before the event. And he was such a sweet, beautiful man. And I said, Dr. Peel, I got to ask you something. I said, what are you doing, still doing seminars at 92 years old? And he looked at me and he smiled and he said, well, Tony, there are still a few negative people out there. I thought, oh, that's great. Only 60 more years of it for me, right? And I said, you know, Norman, I said, you've been around the block, I mean, for almost 100 years. You've read all the books, you've done all the things. I said, I got to ask you, what's the most important lesson you've learned in your life? Better yet, what's the most important lesson any of us can learn? He didn't wait a heartbeat. He looked me right in the face and he said, people have to understand the power and importance of problems. I said, what do you mean? He said, Tony, most people, they're always trying to like solve their problem, get rid of their problem. There's nothing wrong with solving your problem. He said, but they're so upset about it while they're doing it. He said, problems, he said, they're always with you. He said, I said back in 1926, the only person without problems is a person in a cemetery. I said, I think I heard that someplace. So I said that 1926. But you know what? He said, people never quote the entire quote. I said, the only people without problems are in cemeteries. So if you don't have any, get on your knees and pray for some. Say, God, don't you trust me? Because if the only people without problems are in cemeteries, you better start praying for a few. He said, problems are a sign of life. Problems are a gift. And when you get that, your whole life will change. And I know it's hard to remember it when you're in the middle of the problem, but if you do, that perception, that truth will set you free. He said, I'll give you an example. He said, years and years ago, I was receiving this award, and I was speaking at this facility. And he said, the old heavyweight champion boxer, Gene Tunney, and that shows you how old this man was, if you know boxing. Gene Tunney was the world champion of the world at that time, and he was also speaking there. And I was sitting next to him on the dais while we're eating our meal before we spoke. And he said, I kept looking at these big muscles he had. And finally, he said, I took my finger and I poked him on one of his big biceps. And I said, how do you get muscles like that? And he said, Gene looked at me, this big boxer with this ferocious look in his eyes, and he said, do you really want to know, or are you just asking? And Norman said, honestly, I was just asking. But he said, I didn't tell him that. I said, no, I really want to know. And Gene looked at me and he flexed his bicep and he said, I have muscles like this because every day I push against unbelievable amounts of resistance, something that feels inhuman day after day after day. And that's what sculpts these muscles in me. And Norman said, I never forgot that. The minute he said that, he said, I got this picture that that's why God gives us problems. Because as we push back to try and deal with the problems, we sculpt our souls. And without problems, who would we be?
Hey guys, one more thing. I know my girl wants to say happy holidays to you all. My wife Sage, my Bonnie Pearl.
Hi everybody, Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays. God bless.
God bless everyone.
You better watch out, you better not cry.